Welcome everybody to our March 2016 edition of our Fourth Tuesdays Legal Marketing Update for Lawyers. For those of you who have joined us before, welcome back. For those of you who are brand new to this webinar, let me introduce myself. I'm Victoria Blute and I'm the Community Manager here at Lawlytics. My job is really to keep you, the attorney, in the know when it comes to web technologies and trends so that you can really take control of your law firm's online presence. I'm a big believer in the idea that knowledge is power, and I always hope that you come away from these webinars, particularly these ones with Dan and Larry, knowing a little bit more about how your law firm can succeed in a time when there's a lot of competition. One thing that I really love about this particular set of monthly webinars is that if you haven't had the time to keep yourself in the know, no problem. We've really done all the hard work for you here. All you have to do is tune in, sit back, and listen. I'm going to be moderating the discussion today. Again, for those of you who are joining us for the first time, let me give a quick introduction to our two panelists today, and then they'll give you a little bit of information about themselves. So first up, we have Dan Jaffe, the CEO of Lawlytics and an attorney who practiced law in both Washington State and Arizona. He also built and grew successful law firms in those states before getting into the legal tech realm and having a lot of success there as well. Dan, tell our listeners a little bit about yourself.
Thanks, Tori. Good morning, everybody. So I started my first practice in the Seattle area in 1999 and used the internet to build a practice there. That practice got acquired, moved to Arizona, built another practice there, and ultimately transitioned into legal marketing technology full-time when a friend was having some trouble getting traction in his law practice and asked me for some help. And I decided that I would try my hand at developing a legal marketing directory online. Well, that took off so quickly that I had to make the decision, do I do that full-time or do I practice law full-time? Because there were not enough hours in the day to do both as well as I like to do things. Ended up doing that. That business ended up getting acquired about 2 years after it was started, which gave me the time and working capital to start Lawlytics, which is the dream marketing system that I wished I had had when I was practicing law. Now, during my years of marketing my own practice online, and I practiced for about a total of 10 years and have been now in legal marketing technology for another 7 years on top of that, I was very, very aware of an influencer named Larry Bodine. Larry has been writing on the web and influencing the way that the lawyers market themselves, both online and offline, for as long as I can remember. And I kind of grew up in the practice of law and marketing my own practice, aware of Larry, reading his stuff, following his career, and so forth. Larry and I had the good fortune to meet each other a few years ago. I had moved my business Lawlytics from San Francisco to Tucson for a number of reasons. And Larry had also moved to Tucson, and we found ourselves together in the same city, connected through social media. Well, we ended up getting together, talking shop, hit it off. Larry became a user of Lawlytics first as a customer, and we started working together and developed not only a friendship, but a healthy respect for each other and working relationship. And we've been doing seminars and webinars off and on and collaborating on various projects over the course of the last couple of years. And I'm really pleased to announce that Larry has now officially joined Lawlytics as our senior legal marketing strategist. And I'm going to let Larry tell you a little bit more about it, but this is our first public announcement of it. This was formalized just last week, and we're really thrilled to have Larry on board. He adds a lot to our team, a lot of experience, a lot of insight, and just really has a great mind and a great breadth of experience with a lot of the various things that our clients want to be able to do with their law firm. So Larry, I want to welcome you aboard officially and publicly.
Well, thank you very much, Dan. I got to say the feeling is completely mutual, and I'm just delighted to be on the Lawlytics team. We've got a great program together today. We're going to talk about mobile search and ads, legal blogging, and social media. But I wanted to sort of explain why I decided, of all the places I could go, that I was attracted to Lawlytics. I really love the Lawlytics platform. My blog is so easy to update. The admin system is so easy to operate. It's got social media built in, and I'm probably the biggest fan. And I got to know the people at the team at Lawlytics over time, and I got to say, they're such an energetic and such a smart and a tuned-in group of people. So for me, it's completely energizing to be around people who know so much and are so completely dedicated to their work. It's great to be at a place where everybody knows the latest technology on the market. And then the thing that I really enjoy is if you Google law firm marketing, my blog comes up to the top of the page, and I attribute that to the Lawlytics platform, the built-in SEO, and all of the features that are designed in Lawlytics to make my material come to the top of the page. So, Dan, delighted to be on board, and it just couldn't be a better team to be on.
Couldn't agree more, Larry. And for everybody's information, this is being recorded. We will make this video as well as the slides available after the fact. It'll go out in the form of a blog post. And we're going to be here doing this every month on the fourth Tuesday. So with that, let's go ahead and jump into the substance.
Great, thanks, Dan. So here's what we have on the agenda for today. First, we're going to discuss mobile search and ads. We're going to talk about whether you should be relying on ads to carry your law firm's marketing. We'll also talk about recent developments at Google that you'll want to be paying attention to because they may affect your website when it comes to mobile search. Then we're going to talk about legal blogging. If you haven't started a blog yet, we'll tell you when the right time is to do that. And we'll also talk about the question that we so often get here at Lawlytics, which is how long should my blog post be? Lastly, we'll discuss social media and your law firm, how you can harness the power of those tools to get maximal reach to your potential clients and your referral sources. We'll also talk about some new developments at Facebook and, interestingly, why you may want to hold off on that hashtag when you make your next tweet. Let's get started. So, pay-per-click advertising has its own unique set of issues, but this is a new issue that I wanted to bring up. Google recently confirmed that it's eliminating ads on the right side of desktop search results, and it's a move that's going to affect search results regardless of the question that's being asked and regardless of the language. Google's going to be adding a fourth ad above the search results. However, that ad will only occur for what Google describes as a highly commercial query. So you may be asking yourself exactly what that means. In general, Google defines a highly commercial query that's one in which there's an intent to purchase. So a Google spokesperson talked to Search Engine Land a couple weeks ago and said that these might include queries like hotels in New York City or car insurance. So aside from the other issues that PPC sometimes runs into, whether that's the money that you're sinking into it, the fact that statistically many of those ads go unseen, or things like click fraud, Google's latest move is one that it may not be such a great idea to put all of your eggs in the PPC basket, if you will. So I want to first pitch this question to Dan. Dan, in terms of relying on ads to carry your law firm's marketing, what should attorneys know about that?
Well, my stance is, and really always has been, that attorneys should not be relying exclusively on paid ads. Anytime you have an ad that you pay for by the click or by the impression, once that money is spent and that impression or that click happens, you never get that money back. And so it's a cost center rather than an asset that you are investing in. And the problem with being completely reliant on ads, especially online pay-per-click ads, is that it's a live marketplace of bids. and there's no way for you as an attorney to control it. Now, certainly you can make sure that you have high quality scores for your ads, that you do everything you possibly can to make sure that they come up, and also that you minimize the expense of each customer action or impression. But you can't control what other people are bidding. And ultimately, it comes down to how much you're willing to spend. And the problem with spending money on ads and relying on them exclusively is that there is always going to be somebody that can come along, even if just temporarily, and outspend you. And by concentrating on other things, such as creating thought leadership, creating substantive content, really becoming a publisher and an influencer online, it gets you free of depending on those ads. Now, that's not to say that these ads can't be a good crutch or a good interim measure while you're building up your thought leadership. And read thought leadership as free traffic, free advertising online. But I would caution attorneys against becoming reliant on them. There's a lot of marketing companies that are trying to make us as attorneys reliant on pay-per-click ads. It only benefits Google, and it benefits the middleman who's selling those ads. It ultimately doesn't benefit the law firm or the attorneys in the firm to become dependent, though.
Dan, I can give you a good illustration of your point. I was using my cell phone, and I had started up the movie app called Flickster, and I wanted to see what was playing at our famous movie theater here in Tucson, the Loft. And suddenly an ad for an attorney popped up, and it was for a local divorce attorney. And there you see it. I was so struck by it that I took a picture of it, and we reproduce it here. On the one hand, I kind of thought, well, this is an interesting tactic. It was novel for me to see attorneys advertising in cell phone apps. But then after I thought about it a little longer, I thought, I was looking for a movie. I was really not thinking about a divorce, and I really was not thinking about solving any sort of a legal matter. So whoever advised this attorney to place the ad in Flickster, I think they were ill-advised. And while it's novel, it's just like you said, Dan. The money, once you spend the money, it's gone.
Well, and there's a big aspect of just kind of blindly sending money out there. Now, a lot of times if you're buying ads through an ad network, you can't possibly go through as an attorney or even the person that's managing your law firm's marketing from the professional side, whatever marketing agency you're using, can't possibly go through and say, we want to display it on these 100 sites. We don't want to do these. We want, so the net effect is your ads may be displaying on places that you don't want them to be displayed on. And it doesn't matter. It's going to cost you either by the impression or by the click, regardless of whether they're displayed. And there's a lot of that happening with remarketing ads, for example, which are one of the types of ads that I actually believe can bring a lot of benefit to a law firm if done right. The problem is we just see a lot of it being done poorly. To steer back to Tori's observation that the results for certain highly commercial queries will now go 4 deep, and there won't be ads on the side of Google's results. My thought on that is that, one, when you look at the screen size that people are typically browsing on, if it's a small laptop or a cell phone, it's much more likely that the top unpaid results will not be seen above the fold, meaning that the user will have to scroll down in order to see those results. And I suspect that it's Google's hope that more people will click on those results rather than getting to the organic results, while still having the organic results there and leaving more room in the sidebar. But it's interesting to note that the way that they describe the the criteria for 4 results, for 4 paid ads at the top appearing instead of 3 paid ads, is if it's highly relevant commercial search, making it likely that somebody is actually looking to make a purchase decision. And those kind of searches are the kind of searches that most marketing agencies will try to convince lawyers are the most valuable searches. So, for example, DUI attorney, or DUI attorney Atlanta, or Los Angeles divorce lawyer, stuff like that, where people are looking specifically for those. And those types of searches, from what we've experienced, are less likely to result in meaningful engagement with the website. It's much more likely that it's going to be a marketer searching for those, or it's going to be a competitor searching for those, or it's going to be you searching to see where your law firm comes up in those types of searches. We have very strong evidence that most people that are looking to engage lawyers, even if they know they need to hire a lawyer, are not necessarily going to type in those high-level search terms anyways. They're going to be asking questions. What happens when I got that DUI? Or will I be able to keep my house in a divorce? Stuff like that. They ask questions of the search engines, much like they ask us as lawyers when they're sitting across our conference table or our desk from us. And so I see minimal impact on the actual acquisition of clients and potential clients by law firms from this, except for those that are buying into what most of the advertising and law firm marketing companies are selling, which are really just a narrow focus on keywords that mean a lot less than they would like them to mean, and are a lot less valuable than what attorneys actually tend to pay for them.
Thanks, Dan. So on a related note, we've talked about sort of the usual ads in unusual places, but in my experience, as soon as I spot a mobile ad on my phone, I am looking for that little button to close it. I find them annoying in general, especially if how to get rid of them and get back to the content that I was reading is not obvious. But granted, that this is just my opinion here. What do each of you think about mobile ads in general? For our attorneys who have tuned in today, is there a benefit to investing in mobile ads? Dan, I'll start with you first. What do you think?
Well, I think just like any other ad, it's to be done with caution. Certainly, there are some, like for example, if you have an insurance app, or an app that records information in an accident, or that gives information about BAC level in the case of a DUI attorney. Yeah, I mean, it might be relevant to advertise on those, but like Larry's example of divorce advertisement popping up in the middle of a movie app, probably not a good idea unless you're going for just overall brand recognition in a highly targeted local area, which didn't seem to be the case with that particular ad. I think there's a lot of room for a lot of attorneys to waste a lot of money.
Larry, do you have anything you wanted to add?
Yeah, I was just going to say I'm going to add a me too to that. I'm like you, Tori. If I see an ad, I'm really quickly looking for a little X to close it out, with exceptions. Every now and then I'll find some sort of an offer. I think an ad that makes an offer of something valuable will cause me to pause and explore what the ad is. But if it's just, call me now, if you need a divorce, or if you've been hit with a DUI, I close that out immediately.
All right. Continuing on with mobile matters, let's talk about mobile friendliness. So at one point in time, mobile friendliness and responsive design were sort of quote unquote trends, but we now know that these are not trends anymore. They are here to stay. So if you've already got a mobile friendly law firm website, you can breathe a sigh of relief on this one. You're not going to have to worry about the latest change Google is about to make to search results. However, if you've been waiting to get yourself a mobile friendly website, be careful. Google is about to boost its mobile-friendly algorithm that was launched last year, and it may hurt your firm in mobile search results. It was recently revealed that Google's about to make these updates. It's going to be a gradual rollout that begins in May. This particular algorithm, which arrived in April of last year, is designed to give mobile-friendly pages a leg up in Google's mobile search results. And that's great news for attorneys if you've got a mobile-friendly site, and that includes sites that make use of responsive design. If you're not quite there yet and you're hoping that Google sees degrees of mobile friendliness, think again. Google either determines that your website is mobile friendly or not mobile friendly. I'm curious to know what each of you think about this. Dan, I'll start with you first.
Yeah, I think that there was obviously a lot of hype regarding what was back when they first announced this called Mobile Gettin'. And it's only going to get more and more relevant as more and more people switch to cell phones. And anecdotally, when we look at the client inquiries that are coming in, thousands of points of daily data in the Lawlytics system, um, the majority of them are now coming in through mobile devices or tablets, and so there's no doubt in my mind that it's something that's here to stay and should be paid attention to.
Larry, what are your thoughts?
Well, I use my cell phone all the time for everything. I use it for email, for the internet, for all sorts of apps, and I think it's really important for attorneys to be aware of the fact that, as you point out, your next client is going to find you on their smartphone. Google announced that more than half of all the searches done on Google are now done on mobile devices. And I got to tell you, every time I go to a site and, it's run by some kind of an institution that certainly has a budget to get their websites right, and I can't read it because it's not mobile friendly, it's a big turnoff. I mean, it makes me think that the organization really doesn't know what it's doing when it concerns their marketing. So if you don't have a mobile-friendly site, yesterday was the time to get one, because your next client is going to be looking at your law firm website on their smartphone.
Thanks, Larry. Let's talk a little bit about blogging. My attorney bloggers who are listening, here is a secret for you. If you are following my blog and I post something, I assume that you are probably not going to read it, or at least you're not going to read all of it. If you happen to read the headline of the article that I publish, you might keep reading. But some of you I've already lost even 4 or 5 sentences in. Some of you will share an article without reading it. Some of you will scroll to the bottom of a piece without reading what I wrote in the first part of a blog. And the question is, why is that? In our modern world, people tend to skim for information. Readers cannot focus. They are busy, they are distracted, and a lot of times they are not going to read everything that you write. Now, statistically speaking, potential clients read somewhere between 20 and 50% of what you write. And as a lawyer who's discovering how to improve your reach, how to improve your marketing, that's probably not what you want to hear, especially if you're wondering how long that next blog post of yours needs to be. And at Lawlytics, we get a lot of questions about blog post length. So Dan, I'll pitch this one to you first, because I think the question about length can sort of spiral into some bigger questions about, if my clients don't read everything that I write, should I be discouraged from writing blogs or lengthy blogs or blogging at all? I think there are arguments both for writing short blogs and writing long blogs. So my question is, for our listeners, is there such a thing as the blog post that's the quote-unquote right length?
Yeah, no, as far as I've been able to discover, there's no Goldilocks zone for a blog post. It really depends on the subject matter, it depends on the audience, and it depends on the information that's being conveyed. And a law firm may have one blog post that is 300 words that is totally sufficient given the subject matter, and then need to spend thousands of words on another topic. And so, my rule of thumb is to just use whatever amount of space and words that you need to say what you need to say, and get the message across, and just write it so that the most relevant information is at the top, and then it cascades down and gets more and more detailed as you scroll down. What do you think, Larry?
I think brevity is going to go over very well with blog readers. I started out the first 10 years of my life as a newspaper reporter, so I tend to write very concisely. My blog posts will run from 300 words. A really long one will be 600 words. But I'm well aware that, people are in a hurry. They want to get the point right away and move on. So what I do is put in a lot of subheads, H2 subhead tags. If there's a lot of copy and it's kind of difficult to skim, occasionally I will boldface the topic sentence of a paragraph so that somebody can spot it immediately. And then I take advantage of, sort of the BuzzFeed formula. They invented and perfected clickbait. And so I tend to write a lot of top 10 articles, or top 7 things you didn't know, or 4 things that just happened that you can't miss, just because it's a good hook. So I would encourage people to use all of the techniques that journalists do, and in the articles that you like to read. You're going to see a lot of pictures, a lot of hook lines, a lot of subheads, and it's designed to be skimmed and read online. You got to presume that people will not print it out; they're going to read it online. Dan?
Yeah, and for the daily blog posts, I agree. I have also done some experimenting with much longer blog posts, and as have some of our Lawlytics members. And, really notice that while some of those posts are just not worth it because of the amount of time, effort, and attention to detail that they take, there are some topics, and I think every lawyer probably has at least one or two, that you could easily spend 10,000 words on. And so, one of the things that I always recommend doing is, trying some of these experiments for yourself. And if you're a Lawlytics member, it makes it really easy for you to, not only try it, but to measure it as well. And let me just throw this challenge out there to anybody who's up for kind of a good experiment. Find a topic that you could go on and on about that's relevant to your practice, and see if you can write a 10,000 word blog post on it. You don't want to throw in words just for the sake of throwing in words, and you have to understand that the vast majority of your potential clients are not going to read it. But if you write something that is, say, the definitive guide to some new law that came out in your jurisdiction, that piece, by virtue of the good information that you put in it and its length, can serve another purpose. And that purpose is establishing you as a thought leader. So if you've written, what would amount to a very decent sized CLE insert, if you were speaking live to a group at the bar, if you do the same thing on your website with, say, some analysis of pending legislation. Now, one that comes to mind here in Arizona is the legislature is thinking about fundamentally changing the way that the attorney licensing and regulation system works. And it's an issue that affects all lawyers, and it's something that lawyers typically have strong feelings about, or at least they should have strong feelings about. And, I'm pretty sure if I looked into the issue and I sat down and I really, from my years of practicing and understanding what it's been like dealing with the bar, the benefits that they bring and so forth, I'm pretty sure I could write thousands of words on that, really explaining it to other lawyers from my perspective, the pros, the cons, where I stand on it, and guiding them as to where they ought to consider standing on it as well. And so, there's some things that you can't get across in a smaller post, and for that reason, while I think that the bread and butter posts that Larry mentioned, the ones that are more geared towards consumers, somebody that needs the 10 quick tips, to do before you file for a divorce, that type of thing, it makes a lot of sense to do those more often. But I wouldn't shy away from the longer ones either.
So moving on to another topic with legal blogging. For our listeners who haven't started a blog yet, you may have tuned out a little in that last slide, but I recommend that you have your ears perked up for this one, because we've talked about the trouble with ads, we've talked about a little bit about blogging, and now we're going to talk about when you should start a blog. And in our current world, the time to start a blog was yesterday. However, if you haven't started one yet, don't panic. It's really not too late to get into the game and really build yourself an appreciating asset, because that's exactly what a blog can do. Let's talk a little bit about some of the reasons why attorney blogs are great. And Larry, I'm going to start with you on this one, because you have some personal experience in exactly this department. When you go to conferences, what do people often say to you?
Well, whenever I go to a conference and people walk up to me, frequently they already know my name. And then I say hello, and then invariably they say, I've been reading your blog for years. So to me, that's the power of a blog. When I hear that and realize that a blog can give you instant recognition, it can give you authority, it can make it so that you're sort of a household name. I highly encourage lawyers to do blogging, because you'll obtain the exact same result. If you start writing a blog that offers practical, useful information to your clients, you're going to go to the attorney meetings, client meetings, the courthouse, and people will notice. People will remark on it. And, the nice thing about blogging is the longer you do it, the better it gets. So I've been marketing since before the internet was even in existence. And the moment that blogging became available in the 1990s, I started my blog. And I went in and read the statistics on it, and I was floored to see that my blog has gotten 1 million visits over the 10 or 15 years that I've been writing it. And I ask myself, of all the forms of business development and meeting new clients and giving talks and meeting, networking and so forth, when would you ever have an opportunity to meet and make contact with 1 million people? When would you have an opportunity for 1 million visits to come to your law office? You can't really do it in person. Although, in-person marketing is very important. It works extremely well. I do it. But I focus my efforts on updating my blog just because of the reach, the recognition, and the innate engagement that it produces. Dan, what have you found in your experience?
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. It's a matter of, your time is not scalable, but your blog is. You spend an hour or two writing a post, and people will be reading it while you're sleeping, and it will be influencing people. So I think you've done it absolutely right, and you're a really really good example of the success that having a regular blog can create. Now, one of the questions that we get a lot is, should a website and blog be separate for a law firm? And Lawlytics allows you to do either. So you can press a button and it turns into a dedicated blog, or you press another button and it turns into a website with a built-in blog. And for the most part, if the goal is to become a thought leader and get a lot of new business to your law firm, we strongly believe that you should combine the website and the blog into a single website, essentially. So you should blog within the context of your website, which is what your current Lawlytics blog does, Larry, and what most of our customers do. But curious from your perspective, going to the conferences and so forth, Larry, how often you hear attorneys ask that question, and what your response is.
It's a question that comes up a lot, and my answer is why put your information in two different places? You know, why build up two different destinations for people to find you? If you have a website and you have a blog, to me it makes perfect sense that they should be in the same location. You know, that's what's going to draw readers. You know, basically, your blog is what's going to drive traffic to your website, because it's the thing that's updated all the time. So, you know, that's how I've done it, you know, on my own website. You can go to larrybodine.com, and you'll see that you can find, you know, a blog that sort of describes me and what I've done. But, you know, the area that's updated all the time is the blog. So I'm in favor of keeping it all in one bowl, one place.
Dan, here's another question for you. So I know in one of my blogs, I had sort of made a joke in the style of that philosophy question about if a tree falls in the forest and no one's around to hear it. But in this case, if your law firm buys pay-per-click ads, but no one's around to see them, how does blogging fit into engagement if we had to compare it against something like pay-per-click ads?
Well, the pay-per-click, I mean, you're not spending money on them unless people, one, see them, and then two, click on them. And the question of whether people are seeing them, I think, is really what's driving a lot of Google's repositioning, if you will, of the way that they're displaying the ads. People use ad blockers. I've got one on my browser at all times, so I don't have to look at ads. And so I think that's one side of the coin. And the other side is that people go to Google not because they want to see ads, but because they want to get useful information. And if you as an attorney are providing useful information on your blog, on your website, and they find it that way, or they share it through social media, you know, one, you're not paying for it. Two, you're more likely to get seen ultimately, and three, it doesn't have the negative impact that seeing an ad actually does. Because when we see an ad, we all know that somebody's trying to sell something. When we go to a law firm website that describes something that or answers a question that we have, we appreciate the information. You know, now certainly we want to know that firm is available to help with the problem if it goes to that level. But it's a more subtle art of selling. It's essentially networking in the digital age in a way that is much more subtle and much more effective. I mean, it's just really the difference between having a conversation with somebody one-on-one and driving around with a van with a megaphone on it, shouting your message.
One other thing I was thinking about with this, and I know we discussed this a little bit, Dan, is that this thing that's happening more and more often where smaller firms are getting eaten up by these larger firms. When you're writing a blog and it's something you do regularly, why does that put attorneys in a position to survive a law firm merger, if you will?
Well, if you're an individual attorney within a firm writing a blog, for example, and you've got following under your name. So if you're an associate and you're publishing under a partner's name, not a benefit to you. But if you're publishing under your own name and people are reading you and people are going to see you at a conference and just like they do with Larry, say, oh, hey, you know, glad to meet you. I've been reading you for years. That kind of influencing that you cultivate through your writings, whether that's on your website, blog, social media, wherever, it just creates a following, and it makes it more likely that you're a rainmaker. And when firms merge or when firms downsize, the rainmakers are ultimately more valuable because there's a lot of people that can work off cases, but there are a lot fewer people that can actually bring them in.
So if we talk a little bit about social media, something really interesting happened this month, and that has to do with NBA player Stephen Curry. So he has such an absolutely massive Twitter following. It wasn't always that way. He had a fairly impressive number of followers when he was playing as a Davidson Wildcat. However, his former college roommate, who now goes to Stanford Business School, had a very interesting observation about how Stephen Curry ended up with such a tremendous fan base. And that was this. It was that Curry actually took the time to reach out to his fans. His observation was this. He said, what I started seeing was that in the second or third year in the NBA, when he was having an injury-prone year, he started making an effort to connect with fans and go above and beyond. And not just posting things, replying once in a while, but like really going deep with fans, and his audience just skyrocketed. It went from 100,000 users on Twitter to 1 million in about 18 months. Stephen Curry now has 4.5 million followers on Twitter. However, with a following that big, it really became difficult for him to continue deeply connecting with his fan base. So his former roommate, who's now at Stanford, has actually created Curry's own social media platform. And while attorneys likely don't need their own platform, I think there's still something to be learned here about social media from his experience, both in choosing the right platforms and knowing how to interact. So I'm curious to have both of you weigh in on this in terms of engagement. What sort of things should attorneys be doing on social media to engage with their potential clients?
This is Larry. Let me get the conversation started on that. You know, as they say that that you need to look at social media as a cocktail party. It's not a place where you just stand around and talk about yourself and say, buy my stuff, or if you have a legal problem, call this 800 number. The idea behind social media is to engage with people so that if you're doing it right, you start to meet people. I have to say, I've followed people on Twitter, which is my favorite social medium, and it's led to a lot of engagement. It's led to a lot of people that I've gotten to know over time. And of course, when you meet someone on social media, they're going to be as technically adept as you are. So these are people that I tend to enjoy a lot. And a lot of it is just doing the basics. So if you're on Twitter and you notice that someone retweets you, return the favor. Go to their Twitter page and retweet something relevant that they put up. The same thing goes if someone mentions you on Twitter. Go to their page and mention them. And now Twitter has added little hearts. It's a way to like a post, return the favor in kind. People love it. And I follow a lot of metrics to find out which of my tweets are the most effective and get the most engagement. And interestingly, it is the tweets where I thank people for mentioning or retweeting my posts, and I name them by name with their @ handle. Those are the tweets that get liked, mentioned, and retweeted the most. And it illustrates that you're dealing that there's a person behind that @ sign, and they're going to notice the people that pay attention to them, that engage with them, and they're going to respond in kind. A couple of other real basic tips. Twitter, Facebook, and Google Plus, and all the social media are graphic mediums. In other words, if you put up some text, it's going to take up a really tiny amount of space on the screen, not be noticed a lot. But if you put up some sort of an interesting graphic, which you can find on Shutterstock, you can find on Flickr with the Creative Commons license, or which you can find on Pinterest, or you can even create your own graphic. The point is, there's really no point in sending a message on social media unless there's a picture to go with it. And similarly, pay attention to your timeline. If you find that people are following you and they seem to be the kind of person that you might actually want to get to know someday, follow them back. It's all about, the back and forth. And the more you do it, the better experience you're going to have, and the more business you're going to generate.
Dan, how do you feel about that?
I think everything that Larry said is absolutely spot on, and nobody is better at this in the legal realm of creating those kind of online relationships than Larry. In fact, Larry and I first met through social media based on his social media practices, and to the extent that it can create those kind of real life relationships, it's great. And the only thing that I would have to add, beyond the quid pro quo stuff that Larry had mentioned, which I think is very powerful, and it's human psychology that when people publicly like something that you do, you're much more likely to appreciate it and return the favor. Is that if you aim your social media activities within the confines of what Larry just mentioned, to ultimately result in people going back to more substantive pieces of thought leadership that you've created on your website and blog, it can ultimately really help grow your influence that way. Because people can only learn so much in a tweet or even a series of tweets or a Facebook post, and ultimately, if you can get them back to your website from those shared social media destinations where you have a captive audience and somebody is really focused on what you do and what you're saying, that's ideal.
Dan, let me add a little news flash for people who use Twitter. According to new studies, hashtags are out. Hashtags are no longer recommended to be included in your tweets. I was completely floored with this when I first read about it. In fact, Victoria was kind enough to forward me a couple of studies. One was by BuzzSumo, and it studied more than 1 billion Facebook posts, and it found that a Facebook post that included a hashtag got less engagement than one without hashtags. And it really highlights the importance of sharing a different message on different social media. And there's another study that was done by LocoWise. It studied 1,300 Twitter accounts with 60 million combined followers and 600,000 tweets, and it found the same thing. It found the tweets that did not have hashtags outperformed tweets that had them in terms of getting engagement, and that adding a hashtag had no effect on engagement rates. In fact, it actually hurt engagement. And I think that the reason this happened is, I read a lot of tweets, and every now and then I'll run into one that's basically a web address or a couple of words of copy, and then it's all a bunch of spam hashtag words that really don't mean anything. Hashtags were designed to be a way to organize tweets and to make it easy for people to follow a tweet. But I think a lot of people have used them to, express an opinion or an emotion, and they've just junked up their tweets and posts with hashtags. So you heard it here first. If you're on Facebook, if you're on Twitter, stop using hashtags.
Tori, what was that that you were mentioning a couple days ago about artificial intelligence and hashtags?
Oh, I'd read something recently, and this is really fascinating, that people who are trying to work on AI right now actually use hashtags to determine how sarcastic a post is or not. And weirdly, apparently hashtags are a very good way for AI to figure out whether you really mean what you're saying or not. So we'll have to keep our eye on that to see what evolves there. Now, Larry, I know you also had made this very interesting discovery about Facebook instant articles. Can you tell us a little bit about that too?
Yes, this is something that is basically hot off the front page. Facebook has announced that it is going to be offering articles on Facebook that post immediately. One of the things you'll notice when you go on a smartphone and you click on an article, or you click on a link, and then you wait, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and you waited for it to pop up. And a lot of times, impatient cell phone users like myself will just go off. It's like, well, I'll read this later when I have a fast computer to look at it. So to solve that problem with the slow loading time, Facebook has announced instant articles. Now they're going to launch on April 12th. And if you Google Facebook instant articles, you can find out there's an application procedure. It is being used right now by prominent publishers like the New York Times, the Huffington Post, NBC News. So, you know, they're starting with organizations that have a lot of material that they'd like to publish. And as part of the application process, by the way, you have to submit 50 articles for review to Facebook. So now they don't need to be original articles. They can be articles that you already have on your blog. So if you've been smart and you've got 50 articles, it's just a question of making an application. There's a lot of coding involved. You may want to have your IT person sit with you when you read this. But it demonstrates that Facebook has recognized that content is the way to attract people. And by just making one little change, such as when you click on a link, boom, it's right there, that a lot of people are going to prefer that as an approach. So it's something to look into now, something to prepare and decide if it's right for you.
Dan, what are your thoughts about that?
You know me. It's a little early for me to really have well-formed thoughts around it. I like to sit back and study and watch. And so, ask me again in a couple months, and I'm sure I'll probably have some strong opinions one way or the other at that point.
Well, speaking of asking things, we have now moved on to the question and answer session of this webinar. So if you have a question for us, you can enter it into the question section of the GoToWebinar control panel, and we are happy to answer those questions for you.
And I saw that a couple people had raised their hands early on, and the hands are still raised. If that means you have a question, if you could use the questions area. We have too many people here to be able to open up mics because it causes interference. But if you do have questions, let us know. We'll hang on for another minute or so. There are no questions that have come in that I see yet. Did you see any, Tori?
I have not seen any on my side.
Okay. All right, questions are starting to come in, so let's just, we'll give it a... So one question that came in is what about advertising on Facebook, and then locally, is it worth it? It really depends on practice area. It depends on market. It depends on how you get business. There are some methods of Facebook advertising, promoting posts, and so forth that can be very effective. And then there's also the ability to do remarketing on Facebook and other places through ad networks, where if somebody's visited your website, then your ads start following that person around. And to do that and have those ads appear on Facebook can also be very useful in reminding people of your brand and getting them to come back. So for example, if somebody had recently looked up bankruptcy or something on your website, and then your ad starts following them around, and then they're on Facebook, just hanging out, looking at friends' posts and so forth, and they see a plaque that talks about your law firm, kind of reminding them who you are. Well, they may have looked at 15 different bankruptcy attorneys' websites when they were looking. They don't remember any of the names because they all blend together for that person, and they see you, your logo, maybe your face, that type of thing on the side, and they remember you. They click on it, cost you a little bit of money, and they go back to your website and continue on if it's something that they're actively engaged in finding a potential attorney to help them with. And so, it really just depends. What I like to advise our customers to do is if you're going to do it, do really little experiments, measure it, get it set up. Don't just throw something out there. Know what the purpose is. So if you're doing an ad where you're bringing them back to a specific page, have in mind a goal of what that specific page is going to do. Do you want them to request a consultation? Do you want them to download a white paper or brochure? Do you want them to watch a video? What is it? What constitutes success from that ad? And then by spending a little bit of money, you can very quickly determine whether it's paying off. What do you think, Larry?
No, I think that's good advice. You should always test, vary the test, and test again, and continue. And basically, the data will tell you whether it's working or not. You're either getting new clients or getting more visitors, or people are downloading your book or not. A friend of mine, John Fisher, who is a malpractice attorney in New York, has a book, and he uses the book to promote himself and get speaking engagements where he gets clients. And essentially, he sells the book through Facebook ads and then plows the proceeds back into doing additional Facebook ads. So he looks at it as a marketing technique. But the thing is, people are going to respond to something, that's very coate, that's very tangible, like a book or a download or some kind of an offer. If your ad is just saying, call us if you've been in a car accident, do some tests. I don't think you're going to get very good results. But, again, let the data be your guide. Don't get emotionally attached to it. If the data says it's not working, then you learn something and you can stop doing it.
Yeah, absolutely agree. Another question came in, and I'm going to read this because I'm not sure I understand it. I may need to ask for some clarification. A question is, are there some days that are better than others to be picked up by Google Analytics, like Tuesday/Saturday or Monday/Thursday, or doesn't it matter? So the question references, hang on, there's... Okay, so the question, if I'm understanding it correctly now, is are there some days that are better than others to blog? Let me know if I'm off on that, and I'll start answering it.
No, I think you got it.
Okay, so it depends on your audience again. Now, keep in mind that a blog is not an event that comes and goes. If a blog, even if you were to publish it at 3 a.m., it's there and people are going to read it. And the way that it works in the Lawlytics system is that once you publish it, we typically see, because it gets added to a built-in feature that we have called an XML sitemap, which tells Google that it's there. It tells it when it was published and so forth. We typically see for established sites it being crawled somewhere between 5 minutes and a couple hours later and indexed, and then people can start reading it. I think maybe to get to the heart of the question a little bit more is rather than just when to publish the blog post, when to announce it via social media, when to maybe send out a newsletter that leads people to the post and so forth. And I know Larry's got some specific data, so I'll cede the floor to him in a moment on when the best times for engaging people through disruptive media such as emails may be, and social media. There's, from my perspective, it's not necessarily a one and done thing. You could tweet out that you just published the article, and then you could wait a day and you could tweet out something else about it, or better yet, ask questions about it. Did you read this? Do you agree? What do you think? That type of thing. Larry, do you have specific information or opinions about timing, though, of announcing events such as blog posts?
Well, I equate it with trying to time the stock market. It is something that everybody's very interested in, but I don't see a lot of people succeeding with it. That said, the only reliable research that I've read has to do with when you send out an email to promote something. And the magic days are Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. However, the more data that you read about when tweets get read and when blog posts get read, surprisingly, many people will read catch up on their email and read blog posts and tweets on Saturday morning. It's very common for busy people, busy professionals to go into the office on Saturday at like 7 or 8 o'clock, work till noon, and get caught up. Same thing with Sunday afternoon. People, well, I guess there are fewer people like me who sit around and read the New York Times and the local paper on Sunday morning. A lot of people get their news through social media, particularly Facebook. And what better time to do it than Sunday morning with a cup of coffee? It's a great time to browse and see what's new out there. But I keep coming back to check your data. You know, one of the things I like about Lawlytics is I can go in and find out when people are reading my blog posts. So I can set the time span for the last month, and you know, I noticed that it dropped a little bit on the 5th of March, which was Saturday, but it kind of went off the charts on February 22. I'll have to check real quick what day of the week that was. But it, you know, it illustrates the sort of information that you can find if you've got a good analytics program. So the 22nd was a Monday. So maybe that tells me that people read my blog posts on a Monday, but slightly fewer on a Saturday. But you know, what it comes down to is, you know, I don't know everything. Sometimes I think, you know, I'm really not all that smart or clever, but what I do is pay attention to the data. You know, if I look at a chart and I see a big spike at a certain time, well, I'm going to pay attention to that and post on it. You know, you don't have to be a genius to read a post, but you have to take the trouble to look at your Lawlytics report or whatever analytics program you use. And that's what I'd say about that.
And then the follow-up question to that is, so when you post your blog post, does not affect your Google rankings, and yeah, that's correct. There are many factors that go into how well a post or a website or blog as a whole will rank in the search engines. Timing of the actual publication of the post, as far as I'm aware, is not one of those things, because, you know, keep in mind that Google is global. When you publish, it's one time in your time zone. It's obviously other times in other places, and so it's a nonstop, non-sleeping, you know, really time agnostic entity. Now, that being said, if you can figure out times to post where the post initially or immediately gets more traction. So if you post something and all of a sudden you've got 10 Facebook likes, it's been retweeted a couple times, and you've got a couple people that have +1'd it on Google Plus or whatever, and people have commented on it, that makes a difference. And so to the extent that timing of publication affects how that post is consumed, that very well may affect ranking ultimately. But you know, ultimately, it's not something that I would be concerned about. What I would more focus on, and this is another question that came in, is the frequency of blog posts. So the question is, how often, and we get this all the time, how often should I be posting? And the more often you post, the more likely you are, as long as those posts are of high quality and of relevant content, to rank individually and as a whole. And so, you know, if you have a post going out only every 2 months, when you post it might make a lot, time of day, day of month, day of week, that type of thing, might make a bigger impact than if you're posting 2 times a day. Because if you're posting frequently, then people get used to seeing new material, and they will constantly go back to your website to see if you've posted anything new. They'll subscribe to your feed if you have one. They'll look for your email announcements and so forth. You know, so it really just depends. But I would I would not let the perfect be the enemy of progress when it comes to figuring out when to publish. I would just start doing it, and it's kind of a variable and unpredictable reward cycle. But you'll start seeing rewards, and then you'll get a sense in your practice what works as far as cadence, amount, timing, and so forth.
And Dan, if I could just sort of close things out with a tip that I got from you, which is to use the Chrome browser. If you don't have it, download it. And there's a way that you can open what's called an incognito window, so that you're looking at the web without any of the cookies or markers that identify you as you. And then do a search on the terms that you want to be found by in Google. Type in the search terms that you want people to use when they find you, and then see what comes up among the first 10 results. It's a great directory or a good listing for you of the topics that are coming up high. If you type in law firm marketing, you're going to see my top 10 most effective law firm marketing techniques. But you'll see a number of other things. And so it's really a question of just study the people who are successful and do what the successful people do. Dan, what do you think?
Yeah, I wouldn't blindly imitate. And I know this is not what you're saying, Larry, but I just want to throw this out there. I wouldn't blindly imitate what people that are experiencing success are doing, because for any given keyword, there are still some sites that are doing most tricks don't work. SEO in terms of Google as it's being sold as a way to manipulate Google and the other search engines is pretty much a dead scam at this point. But there may be things other than what you see on the page that are affecting the ranking of that page, and so it's not wise to just copy it exactly. Otherwise, everybody's stuff just ends up looking like everybody else's, and there's nothing to set you apart. But I think what Larry is getting at is topic selection as well. So if you type in law firm marketing and so forth, you'll see his article as number one. But what are other people writing about that Google sees as relevant? What other topics are there that come up that maybe you as an author didn't think about? So if it happens to be Seattle personal injury law, for example, what are other people that are ranking for that, writing about that are coming up? Great. Well, I see a comment, and thanks, Sean. Good. I'm glad you're here. Let's catch up sometime soon. I don't see any other questions that have come in, and so if you do have questions that occur after the fact, we're always here. We're happy to talk. If you are a Lawlytics customer already, you already know how accessible we are, and you can ask for help anytime. We'll walk you through the technology. We'll walk you through the strategy. We'll help you plan, do whatever you need to do to get yourself ahead. And we're also here to help you with content services and other marketing services as well. If you are not yet a Lawlytics customer and are interested, recommend going to the Lawlytics website, lawlytics.com, and there's a button at the upper right-hand corner to schedule a demo or a consultation. We're happy to answer your questions, walk you through, and discuss marketing strategy with you, and see see where you're at, where you want to go, and see what we can do to help or to point you in the right direction. With that, Tori, do you want to talk about our next webinars?
Yeah, absolutely. So tomorrow we have got debunking SEO reports. So if you have had an SEO provider come to you and tell you that there's something wrong with your website, we are going to demystify that process for you. By the end of it, you will know what's real and what's not, where those reports are concerned. On Thursday, we have got writing blog posts that your clients will read. So if you're not sure what to write, If the stuff that you're writing is falling flat, if you just need some new ideas, tune into that one to really revamp your blog posts and get you writing your next great piece. And of course, all of those webinars, just like today's, that's 10 a.m. PDT, and that I believe is noontime Eastern. Is that correct, Dan?
That's 1 o'clock now,
1
Eastern.
o'clock,
We're in
pardon me.
Arizona, and we're the state that doesn't spring forward or fall back. And so we're just getting our national time zone legs under us again. Yeah, and if you've registered for this webinar, you will not need to register again. You're already registered through the end of the year. GoToWebinar will send you out reminders, as I'm sure it did leading up to this one. And we'd encourage you to go and look at our on-demand webinar offerings as well. There's a lot of interesting information that can be useful to building a practice in there. So with that, I think we'll go ahead and end the webinar. I want to thank you, Larry, and thank you, Tori, and we will hopefully see some of you tomorrow.
All right. Thanks again, Dan.
Thanks.